Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CarPod. So today we're going to be focusing on IB Business Management, which is an elective that we offer here in the IB program at Hoover High. So since neither Claudia nor I have taken this class, we brought a special guest today to talk about it.
Yay!
Alex Brockmannn is here, and he's going to be talking about his overall experience in IB and his experience in IB Business Management. So, Alex, if you want to introduce yourself.
So, as Charlie so kindly did earlier, my name is Alex. I am planning on studying economics at Loyola University Chicago this upcoming school year. And IB Business Management has been an excellent way for me to strengthen my business skills and my economic base of knowledge. Because the class focuses on business principles and the ways that businesses and individuals interact within the modern society. I think it's an excellent class, and it's a shame that neither Claudia nor Charlie are in that class, but what can I do?
I wanted to take it, but it wouldn't work with my schedule. And so I've, been through Business Academy, and so, I've done some business stuff, but, yeah, I haven't taken this class specifically.
I find business to be mind-numbingly boring, so that's why I haven't taken it. I took a different elective. So, anyway, Alex, do you want to talk about, how, why did you do IB, the different projects you've done in IB, like your EE cast project, stuff like that?
Yeah, not a big deal at all. As people know, I love talking about the values of the IB program. I think it's an excellent honors program for any student who is willing to enrich themselves both within the classroom and outside the classroom. For example, my CAST project was a community service cleanup day within Moss Rock, and I scheduled a day to get rid of some invasive species, mainly privet, from Moss Rock because it kind of drives out native species. And Charlie showed up, and I hope she liked it.
It was definitely an experience.
I'm an Eagle Scout, so I'm used to this, and I keep forgetting that not everybody else is. But, that goes to show the values that the IB program instills in people. Even if you don't foresee yourself as a community-oriented person, the IB program instills this sense of importance within the community, and how do you as an individual impact your community, whether it's through small ways or big ways. And I think it's an excellent thing for anybody to do. And I really preferred to take IB over AP classes when I was in 9th grade and 8th grade, actually, choosing my courses, just because I knew the holistic nature of the IB course. And the classes are rigorous, but I feel that I've become a lot better as a student and as a person through the values of the IB program, versus if I had just taken AP classes where, yes, it is a college level course, and the rigorous my words are not wording today. The rigor of the classes is very similar to IB, but you don't have that sense of community, and you don't have that holistic experience of an education. Anyways, long way to say I like IB.
So, you talked about your CAST project, what was your EE, and why did you choose your EE?
So, I'm a little bit of an economics nut, as I alluded to earlier, and I'm sure every single time I mention this topic, they're going to fall asleep within 5 minutes. So
It's okay.
I tell people, if you for some reason cannot fall asleep and the melatonin isn't working, read my EE. You're going to be out. All jokes aside, I decided to do mine on the post-World War II period of West Germany and their economic recovery, specifically within specific socio-economic policies set up by the Christian Democratic Union under their economic leadership and the chancellor at the time, as well as a comparison against the socialist and Stalin-esque East. So, yes, it's a very archaic, and not necessarily archaic, it's a very obtuse topic.
Obscure?
No, obtuse, it's long-winded, it's annoying, but I personally love it. Yes. But that's what I decided, and I chose it just because the EE is an open-ended thing, and you have a lot of leeway over what you want to choose and what you want to research. And through that, I got to learn a lot more about a topic that I had researched for fun in the past, but didn't necessarily have a strong incentive to dive deep into and to read academic texts, and to formulate my own opinion based off of the opinions of other historians and primary sources. And I found that to be an excellent experience. The EE is really what you make it. If you're the type of person to just put it off and not want to do it, or choose a topic that you're like, this is going to be easy, but you don't have any motivation to research it, it's going to be a pain in the butt because you're not going to have any motivation to actually do your work.
Right.
So, I'm glad I at least chose something I cared about, It's...
So I guess, what's your favorite IB class that you've taken so far?
My favorite IB class I've taken so far, it really depends on the year and sometimes the day.
The minute
Sometimes I'm like, ugh. I don't know. I feel like the best class in terms of actual improvements that I've noticed year over year was definitely IB English 11. Just because we focused so much on writing and we focused so much on grammar that it helped me with my ACT. Thank you, Mr. Lockme.
Yes.
Thank you.
And, like, the way Mr. Lockme teaches too, it wasn't even like boring either. Like
No,
it was like
no,
so
no.
helpful, but also like entertaining.
And I also found it to be an excellent class because we read a lot of pieces of work that I would have never read in the past.
But they actually were interesting too.
Exactly. And different viewpoints of different things. Like we read a lot of Southeast Asian works and things that related to like an Asian viewpoint, whether it was like the Lahiri short stories or Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress. I had a lot more exposure now to those types of literature than I may have had in the past, where we tend to be more focused on Western literature. So I found the class to be excellent, especially with all the writing we did.
Oh, yeah. I also feel like that class really reflects the diversity of IB, just with the books that we write, because we have a large Southeast Asian population, and we read a couple of works by Southeast Asian authors. We have just we have Chinese people in IB, Japanese, Korean, and we read books by authors from those ethnicities. We have a large, not a terribly large, but we have quite a few Black people in IB as well, and we read books by Black authors. So, I mean, I feel like the books that we read really reflect the diversity of IB as well.
And that's one of the nice things about Mr. Lockme is, although he's a white man, he also is like, he's like diversity council.
Yes,
is that what it is?
he's the sponsor for the
Diversity.
Student Diversity Council.
And he also teaches an African American literature class, which I got to sit on in sometimes last year, it was really awesome. And I also would like to plug that class.
Yes.
Even though
you can take it,
it's
take
amazing.
it.
It's not an IB class, but it's an amazing class that you should still take. But yeah, so I guess let's talk about IB business now.
Yes. You know what I'm here for.
So I guess you want to do like a recap of, like, I know you kind of like already briefly talked about it, but like some of the highlights, I guess, like what are some of the things you learn about in that class, like specifically?
Yeah, so currently we're talking about marketing, and we're kind of like in our marketing sub-unit. But the nice part of that class is it's not just a marketing class. It's not just a business theory class. It's not just a demographics class. You learn a lot about what businesses use to be profitable and how businesses can actually be entities for good. So we talk a lot about business ethics and the impacts that businesses have on individuals and the ways that individuals impact businesses, which I like personally. It's not necessarily a skewed topic where it's like, oh, businesses are the most benevolent, amazing entities ever. Like, we do talk about the massive failures and fraud and corruption. But as I mentioned earlier, we are currently in our marketing unit. So we're talking about how demographics play a role in how companies market and the different niches that companies need to fit. And as well as talking about how like large multinational companies such as Adidas have different brands and different sub lines and different types of advertising to target specific clients. Like, you may see an Adidas sweatshirt in a Ross or in a TJ Maxx, but that's going to be completely different than an Adidas sweatshirt in Nordstrom, for example. The ways in which companies try to pivot to different individuals and their tastes, I think is really fascinating. And I'm really excited to see where the rest of the class will go. I know Mrs. Kimball, this year, she didn't necessarily have the biggest chance to do it just because the curriculum is changing for the next calendar year, for the next school year. But she wants to implement modern classrooms, which is a thing that I personally wish we had in some of my classes. And this is something where the teachers will pre-record the lectures. It's similar to what Mr. Richardson does, but instead of you going through and like day by day and the teacher would be like, hey, read this lecture by this day or watch this video by this day, it's more of like, hey, you have a month to do all these lectures. I don't mind how you do it. If you have questions, talk to me in class, but you're able to watch the video and it's well done and you're able to ask questions in class. So it's not necessarily like fully online, but if a student is faster and maybe they understand the topic really well. So when we were talking about business theory, I didn't really have to think much. I already knew most about it. But like this marketing thing, there are things that I wouldn't know, but my best friend, Kalia Redwine, she's taken marketing before and she knows what those terms are. She could have gone ahead in marketing and started doing something that maybe had challenged her a little bit. So I think that's something that next year's students will really, really get to take to the fullest advantage. So I'm excited for that. Sorry.
I love Miss Kimball. Just like as a plug, she's so amazing and a great teacher and very qualified teacher. I think because she went to school at Alabama, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she also teaches at Alabama some too.
Yep.
And Miss Kimball is a wonderful teacher, a very helpful teacher too. So I guess, how do IAs and exams work in business management?
So we haven't necessarily gotten around to working on our IA. We've chosen a topic, and so our job with that was we signed up for this newsletter called Morning Brew. I don't necessarily know if all the other business teachers made their students sign up for it, but we did as a class. And that just talks about the business headlines for that day or maybe repercussions from something that happened the previous week. And you choose a topic kind of piggybacking off maybe an idea you see in the Morning Brew or some other newsletter you get. And then what will happen is you just develop a topic around that. So from what I know as of right now, this is subject to change. I am doing an IA regarding Apple's confusing marketing strategy around their iPad because they sell like 5 iPads right now. The 9th generation, 10th generation, Air, Pro, Big Pro, older Pro, newer Pro. It's confusing in all the accessories that they sell. And so I'm trying to investigate like how does this sense of artificial segmentation actually hurt consumers, because it used to be there were only like 2 or 3 iPads. You had the mini, you had the normal one, and you had the Pro. And that was it for a long time. But then they started experimenting and try to add all these new things, and like certain iPads have new keyboards, but the old pen works and you can't use a new one. Mm-hmm. Some ones have specific keyboard portfolios and other ones that don't work with it. And it's just like a whole mess. And there are specific features that are locked per one iPad just from a software. Like there's no actual hardware limitation. They just want to artificially make you go to the more expensive ones. Like, oh, maybe I need this feature.
Right.
So I want to investigate that. And I think if I had, well, actually I know, because I've taken Business Academy for 4 years now, that my other business classes would have not allowed us to do this much research into a topic and allowed us to really get our hands dirty and understand, like, why do businesses run the way they do and how do they impact us as consumers? So I'm really excited for the IA. And with exams, as you mentioned, in your question, honestly, it's just a standard IB exam. I haven't really gotten too much in terms of information. I do know we do case studies and we do that for every test. So we kind of get an overview of the case study, but we don't necessarily get to the questions when we have the exam. So we already get to look, from what I know at least, this is subject to change, but what Ms. Kimball told us is you get a look at the exam case study that they'll give you. So like it's some like guy owning a burger place, and then when you go in and walk into your exam, you'll have specific questions that you need to answer for some other subunit. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
I really like the way that you were kind of talking about with your IA, like how you're like kind of focusing on marketing, but like also like how you said that you really have more interest in economics. I think that really is like a really cool thing about IB, how like you can expand your interest and like part of the IB learner profile or whatever, having an open mind and having a growth mindset, and I think that's a really good example of that. And,
yeah.
So what are I don't really know how the class works. So, like, how do you, like, study for the class and, like, learn in the class? I know you talked about case studies.
Yeah.
And
So, honestly, we do a lot of activities within the class, which I personally appreciate. The class is an elective class, and that does come with certain advantages, mainly that it is on the easier side, which I'm not personally complaining about, but easy doesn't necessarily mean that it's boring. Miss Kimball does a really good job at keeping it fun for us. So what we'll do is, in her class, like, to keep us on our toes, she'll very often, like, for the highest performing person on the quiz, like, she uses Kia. Lord knows why. I wish she
teachers do.
Use what?
Kia. It's like this thing. It's from IXL. It's from the IXL company.
Oh.
And it's like Google Forms, but stuck in 2005. It is. You can't, like, it's so frustrating because in Google Forms, it shows you all the questions in one go, unless the teachers are like, no, we're going to have one question per page. Like, most teachers are like, hey, 20 questions, and then next, another 20. But Kia is horrible, so I don't know why she used it. Anyways, besides the point. Whoever gets the highest score on the Kia, they get a Kimball Cash, which is just like this fake dollar bill. It used to be like this fake classroom money that looked like real money, but now she's just like, no, I'm going to cut it out into paper slips. And I can't blame her, honestly. And you can turn that in. It's basically like a glorified homework pass, or to get an extra bonus point or two on a quiz. It just depends on how difficult the quiz was, she feels, and how difficult the case study was, like how many marks you do. Like some case studies, she's like, hey, do up to 20 marks of questions. So it may be like, hey, this question is 2 marks, this question is 10 marks. Get a combination, get to 20. Sometimes it's only 10. So we study a lot with Kahoots within the classroom, and we also follow her along with slideshows, but she keeps it interesting. Like, she'll give us personal anecdotes, and she will give us YouTube videos within the PowerPoint to watch that explains on a concept more. So it's not just her droning on and on and on and on and on about a specific thing. It's like actually interesting stuff, which I find to be great. But honestly, the class is pretty rational. You don't necessarily have to go into really arcane topics. You're not going to get lost. So.
Right. So for you personally, what have been like the hardest and easiest like units and subjects?
I would say the most recent one is probably marketing. We were talking about the difference between like a target market and market segment, and that can be a little bit difficult to rationalize because for me they're synonyms, but for other people they're like, no, that's clearly not a synonym. And I was like, are you sure? Are you really sure? They sound the same to me. So in that case, yes, that was confusing, and I honestly did not get it. But I studied for it, and I didn't do as well as I anticipated, but that's just how things go. I've kind of learned over the past 4 years, like, hey, there are just going to be things that you understand, and other things you're just like, no matter how much studying I'm going to do, this topic is not going to go click in my head. Yes. Marketing, the beginning, like, intro part was that way. Now it's a lot easier because now we're doing demographics and things I'm more familiar with. I feel like the easiest topic was definitely, like, supply chains and, like, added value of, like, primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, like, means of production. And Charlie's looking at me like, what are you on?
This is like, it's like I'm in Spanish class. Like, I'm not understanding.
¿Qué hablas? ¿Qué estás haciendo?
I'm not understanding anything what you're saying.
Believe me, sometimes I don't either. I'll be saying something like, was that really right? No. Sorry. But honestly, the class itself, there's not necessarily something I would say was overwhelmingly difficult. As I alluded to earlier, it is common sense stuff. And it's more of applying.
That's what most of business is common sense.
But it's nice because it's not just common sense like, oh, this is easy, but it's common sense like, this has a real application to my life, which I think is great.
So I guess what are some of your tips for the class?
Being successful in IB business management.
I would say make sure you at least, this is so cliche, but study. It's not hard stuff, but sometimes you will just go into class and you're like, I really don't want to come into this class. I really don't want to do the work. I'm not going to pretend like I'm all high and mighty over here. I've had my days too. Senioritis is real.
Oh my goodness.
Senioritis is real.
Yes.
And there are definitely days where I'm just like, I really don't want to do my work. And then it shows on the quiz or whatever showed up. I'm like, ooh. Do the case studies. Take the case studies seriously. I think if I'm being serious, not just study, but do the case studies. Actually put your nose to the grindstone, try to understand it, because that is the best way to actually get an application for what you're learning in class. Like, yeah, you may know what a market demographic is in a vacuum, but can you apply that knowledge to something in a real life situation? Like, for example, we had a case study, and it was like this golf course in this city, and it was like the most elite golf course in the city, but because they had hard courses and their membership rate was expensive, they wanted to start pivoting to younger audiences. And so you had to talk about, like, how would they do a new social media campaign that would serve mainly women who were under the age of 30 and had golf for like a few years before. And how did you change your marketing message instead of being like older 50-year-old plus white men who have been golfing for like 35-40 years at that point. So it's things like that which really help strengthen the class into like a real world perspective, but it's only as good as a student's effort towards the assignment. Student's not going to put any effort into it. There's no point. It's really there for you to understand it. It's not just for you to get a grade.
Right. Any other tips you have?
Honestly, no. It's a pretty straightforward class.
so
Just bring your A
like
game.
So would you suggest, kids who are coming into IB, whether that's from 8th grade to 9th grade or like 10th to 11th, when they're starting to figure out, oh, am I doing courses? Am I doing full diploma? Like for their elective, would you suggest they take IB Business Management?
Yeah, I would. Especially if you're already doing Business Academy, then most likely you'll be taking it your senior year of high school. And I personally recommend taking it your senior year. I really wanted to take it my junior year, but because of scheduling conflicts, I just could not. And IB's rule, especially if you're a diploma student, you cannot have more than 2 electives per year. And
No, your
It was
junior year, you can't take more than 2 exams.
That's it.
Yeah.
My bad. It wasn't the electives. If you're a diploma student now, certificate doesn't have that rule. I don't know. IB, as Mr. McEwen says, is just this ethereal guy, and he tries to understand it, and then he never does. So I can't blame him. But yeah, if you're going into Business Academy already, I would definitely say do it your senior year. It's going to be an excellent recap of everything you've already talked about from 9th until 11th grade. And I even have a few people in that class who are not Business Academy like students. Like Mary Sullivan, for example, is an excellent choice. Like, she does law, but she can see a lot of business law being applied to business. That was business law. But she really can see like the value of that class, even though she's in Law Academy and she hadn't taken business classes.
Right.
So would you say like being in Business Academy is giving you an advantage, or do you think it would be good for anybody to take?
I think the class itself, IB Business Management, is great for anybody to take. And I would say the advantage of Business Academy is a good one, especially because they have a lot more certification practice than, at least from what I know, like law does. Like, do you guys do certification practice, Charlie?
I don't even know what that means. So, I'm gonna say no.
So, for example, like, I'm Microsoft Excel certified, and I know everybody puts on the resume, fluent in Excel, proficient in Word. It's like, but I'm actually certified by Microsoft to do PowerPoint and to do Excel, and I'm nearly done with Word. And then I get the trifecta. You're like an Office certified. And then also a big thing with Business Academy is DECA.
Yeah.
And my mom did DECA in high school, and she loved it. She was the vice president for the Seattle chapter, and she loved it. And so when she saw that my school had it, she was like, yeah, you really should do this. And unfortunately, I did get my year kind of cut short because COVID happened when I was a 9th grader, and then 10th grade was virtual, and I did not want to pay $80 for a glorified Zoom class. I was like, And then junior year got really busy.
Oh yeah.
With IB diploma, like
We
Claudia.
were gonna do a DECA thing together last year, and then we were like, "Whoa, junior year, crazy."
Yeah, and honestly, it's probably a good thing we didn't do it. But my senior year, I'm competing. I'm doing like business finance, and that's something that I feel like for maybe the student who has a little bit more time on their plate, DECA is definitely something you should look into. And that's just an advantage of Business Academy that's not necessarily IB related, but it ties so well into the nature of IB that it's like, why not just do it? If you're already doing IB Business Management, do DECA. Like, you will actually enjoy it. I haven't had any regrets doing it in all 4 years.
And as like a member of the class, you don't have to be in Business Academy to be in part of DECA. No. You can be a non-Business Academy person taking IB Management and still do DECA.
Yep.
And Miss Kimball, I remember her mentioning to me that like she doesn't have much time to do it in her IB business management class, but I'd imagine she still does find ways to tie DECA into the class itself.
Yes, all the time. All the time.
How would you compare the case studies you'll do for IB to like DECA roleplay stuff?
I actually feel like the case studies are more in-depth for IB than the DECA roleplay ones, but I can definitely tell you after doing a lot of pre-practice case studies for DECA that it has helped me tremendously with the case studies for business, just because the IB business ones have very specific targets for you to meet, and there's a very specific way of going around it. And since you practice so much doing it, you definitely get a feel for, hey, this is what they're looking for, this is what you need to do, and it's excellent practice. I definitely would say that if you've already done DECA before and you've done case studies like I had during my like ninth grade year for certain, I did a lot of them. It helped me tremendously with the class. So there's literally no reason I would think to not do DECA and be an IB management. It's such an excellent fusion.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's covers all the things I have to. Do you have anything?
I don't think so. I mean, I just want to say that I've learned a lot about
Mr. Chatty Cathy back here.
I've learned a lot about just business. I mean, just hearing you talk about it, clearly you're passionate about it, and clearly, I mean, this class has done some good because you're able to just sit here and talk about it,
Yeah.
And I mean, you make it sound interesting, which is...
And Charlie's like, that's hard to do.
Right.
Business sounds very boring.
Business for me, that's hard to do. So I really enjoyed listening to you talk about it. But thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Being here. I really appreciate you helping us with this.
Of course.
So yeah, if you're listening to this on YouTube, because we are putting this on YouTube.
Oh.
Comments, what emoji should they comment, Alex?
The money emoji.
Yeah. yes, the
Get
money
banked.
emoji. So yes, listen to Alex, comment the money emoji.
The money with the wings. Fly away.
Yes. And thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the CarPod. Thank you, Alex, for joining us. We
Honored.
really appreciate it. And I hope you all enjoyed, and we will see y'all in the next episode.